Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. So, there's only really one place to start because we've had some unexpected events in terms of the transfer market and Spurs making a move for a player that, let's be honest, when we probably all first heard the name, I think the general reaction probably would have been, eh? But actually, it makes a bit of sense. It's Timo Werner, I should point out, the former Chelsea player. Um, I'm kind of doing my normal digging into these things and being quite over the top obsessive about looking into stats and little bits and pieces and things and talking to other people as well about the move itself and the player himself, and just trying to kind of understand it. Because, on the face of it, you kind of just think, well, isn't he that chap that played at Chelsea and kind of had high-profile misses and people said, well, it didn't work out for him, he was a bit of a flop. But actually, there's a kind of a lot to this deal that makes sense. So, if you're not aware of exactly what's happened, so Spurs have moved very quickly on this. The negotiations, everything has advanced very quickly from the off. From what I understand, he's been an option within Spurs' list of potential attackers. I've told you this in the past, that they've been looking for an attacker who can play out wide and also through the middle. This is exactly what Timo Werner can do. I don't think any of us realised kind of he was on that list of options, but that's a kind of the great thing, I guess, is that journalists can't be across everything. And that's sometimes a good thing, as much as it pains me as a journalist to say, but it allows clubs like Tottenham especially, who like to do these kind of deals, to get in there and tie up a deal without the kind of involvement or interference of other clubs that might suddenly want to hijack it. Yes, kind of speculation quickly grows around in kind of the agent community, but I still think this one, from speaking to various agents and people in the game, I think this one's surprised a lot of people as well. It's like I say, all very quickly in the space of about 24 hours or so, has just suddenly accelerated to the point where it is almost done. Timo Werner is going to he'll move back over, I guess, to England in the next 28 to 48 hours. He's expected to be in England by the end of this weekend, get it all tied up. Spurs players have been given Saturday and Sunday off this weekend because of their FA Cup exploits and the fact that they've got 9 days between games. So Ange Postecoglou, Chris Davies, his coaching staff can all work with them across a full week, essentially ahead of the game, while also giving them a couple of days to rest their weary bones. So the idea is to try to get Werner into training on either Monday or Tuesday and kind of just getting cracking on with it, really, ahead of the Man U game. You can get him into the squad for that. So the deal itself, it's initially a loan to the end of the season, and then after that there's an option to buy in the summer, which, from what I understand, and it certainly seems to be backed up in Germany as well, they've been saying this kind of figure. It's been a bit of a kind of a range of figures, but it appears to be, certainly could be, no more than £15.5 million as an option. So it's kind of one of, before we even get into the nitty gritty of what you think about Timo Werner, what he's done, what he hasn't done, things like that, on the face of it, either way, that's a deal for a player where you can have a look at him for the remainder of the season. If he's a success, fantastic. 15.5 million is a very small deal for a player in today's kind of market. German international, 27 years old. It's a good deal. If it doesn't work at all, and it's just one of those ones that you try before you buy, if he ends up not being great, straight back to Leipzig. It is a good deal in that respect. And from what I understand, Ange Postecoglou has been instrumental in it. I think he sees a player in Werner who has a lot of the physical attributes that fit his system perfectly. Of course, you've got the pace, we know about that. But also the selflessness and kind of work ethic for the team, we know he loves that. And the ability to press, but also get back as well down those flanks if required. And like I said at the top of this, the ability to play not only on the left predominantly of the two wings, but also through the middle. He's played a lot through the centre in his career, but he can also play on the right as well. So it's just another one of these. You'll notice that a lot of his players that he'll bring in can kind of multitask in various roles. It could be because he knackers a lot of his players out and they pick up injuries, especially hamstring injuries in the first 6 months to a year of his reign, as we've spoken about before. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It is. Obviously, kind of Leipzig have pretty much kind of, well, they've kind of confirmed it. They put out a statement saying that he was not going to be in their friendly against St. Gallen today because he was in talks with another club. We know who that other club was. I think their manager, I saw just before I kind of was coming into this video, that he'd essentially said that, he kind of goes with their best wishes because he wanted game time. He wanted to be in contention, I guess, put himself into contention for the Germany squad for the Euros. So it's all kind of to do with that. And yeah, like I say, Postecoglou is very keen on this deal. It's one of those where I know people are. I know the natural reaction that whenever anyone says that about a manager who's going to say, "Oh, well, you would say that anyway because blah blah blah. It's this or it's a good deal or whatever." But the truth is, especially with Postecoglou, he has to be, because Spurs won't sign a player that Postecoglou is not happy to have in his squad. We've had managers like Mourinho and Conte who have surprisingly, especially with their reputations, have put up with players brought into their team or squad that were maybe you can imagine they were kind of almost convinced to bring them in. I mean, we spoke about it previously about Danjuma, decent player, but did he fit Conte's system? Not even in the slightest. He admitted that himself. Jed Spence, another one, we're going to talk about him later. But with Postecoglou, perhaps the most single-minded of all of those, which might be a surprise to some in terms of when you see it's Mourinho and Conte. But with Postecoglou, there is no point trying to bring in a player that he knows will not fit his system or is not a good choice for his team and can improve it. He just will not have it. And that's a good thing. And I think we've seen that in the transfers so far. They've all kind of worked because they fitted in perfectly. They've adapted very quickly because he knew they would, because he's going to put them in a style of football that, regardless of the league, is going to get the best out of them. And this, apparently, is the feeling with Timo Werner. I mean, for me, with Sonny especially away at the moment and the big kind of hole that's left in the squad, I think it's a non-risk move, really, to bring in someone that can play down that left-hand side or through the middle or on the right. But even when Sonny comes back, if you think about, I'm not saying certain players will be out, who knows where they'll be on the pitch. But if you just think about it in a loan, let's say they were to do a front three of, for a game of Werner, Son and Johnson, the pace in that front three is terrifying. That is a ridiculous front three in terms of speed. I'm not saying Kulusevski won't play. He might be sitting in midfield. And I'm not saying Richarlison's going to get bombed out either. I'm just saying if he were to use against a certain opposition that front three, that's scary in terms of pace. And yeah, like I say, Werner has that pace. He has that energy to kind of burn almost all day long. And I think a good way to judge it is as another option. For example, last night against Burnley, if you'd had Timo Werner on that bench, would he have made an impact coming into the game? Would he have altered what happened in that second half if he'd come off the bench? Yes, I think has to be the answer. We looked at that bench and we were kind of like, there's a lot of young talent there, but obviously untried. But, who are you going to bring off the bench? And obviously it was kind of Brian Hill was the main one to bring off the bench. And again, another player we'll have a little chat about in a bit, because I do wonder what the Timo Werner move means for him. But with Brian Hill, lots of nice little moments. Is he a Premier League kind of ready player for the physicality of it? I think we're still having our doubts these couple of years on about that. So definitely with Timo Werner, there's an aspect to him that, of course, Postecoglou is going to have to get so much more out of him than he brought for Chelsea. And look, that's where the question marks lie. Of course they do. There's no getting away from it. And I promise I'm not trying to paint this as a, "What's amazing, what a wonderful buy." I'm very much saying the deal itself is a terrific one in terms of the non-risk element really for Spurs for it. They get a player with a lot of experience. This is a guy who, was quite instrumental, despite all the criticism around him, in Chelsea winning the Champions League that season. I think he played in almost started almost every game on that run to the Champions League trophy. And yeah, but I am absolutely acknowledging the areas of his game that have completely had gone off the boil, especially at Chelsea. He was known for these high-profile misses. Question marks to just guess over the final third ability that he had, and also the offsides. If we thought Richarlison and Defoe gave us a lot of offsides, from what I talked to people at Chelsea, Timo Werner, that was, the flag was, wasn't, I was going to say the flag was his friend, but it wasn't, because it kept going up, just to say hello. But again, though, all of that around him, and the negativity, I guess, around his time at Chelsea, drill down into the actual numbers, and it kind of paints a slightly better picture, or a much better picture, really. So, while he was at Chelsea, he scored 23 goals and laid on 21 assists in 89 appearances. So that's pretty much almost bang on a goal involvement in nearly every other game. It's not the worst in the way. It's not the numbers of someone that, you would immediately think of when someone says the name Timo Werner. Obviously, let's not get away from it. Before he came to Chelsea, he was a phenomenon. He was absolutely incredible. He went from Stuttgart to Leipzig, had a couple of really good seasons, and had this amazing season before he came to Chelsea, where he scored 34 goals in 45 matches and laid on 13 assists. He was just sublime. I think he went there for about, I think it was a Johnson figure, the same one. I think it was £47.5 million. So he wasn't able to replicate that. Of course he wasn't. The Premier League is a different beast to the Bundesliga. It's probably the most similar league in terms of the pace and physicality, but obviously he wasn't able to replicate those kind of numbers. Again, it's a different system, it's a different way of playing. I think it was under Nagelsmann, wasn't it? Funnily enough, it was Nagelsmann who, I think he's part of the same agency as well as Nagelsmann, I think. But yeah, so that was an incredible season. And to be fair, since he's I think a few people have said, he's gone completely off the radar since he's in recent years. But actually, since he went back to Leipzig, he's kind of got back on track. Last season, 22 goal involvements in 40 matches. So that's 16 goals and 6 assists. This season has been difficult, absolutely. He had an adductor injury, which kind of fragmented his season a bit, the first half of the season in the middle. He's only had 2 starts in the Bundesliga, scored 2 goals, one in one of those starts, one in another substitute appearance. So yeah, this hasn't been the greatest season for him. But like I say, he's got a lot of experience, got a lot of versatility. Postecoglou is clearly going to have to work with him, and Chris Davies and Ryan Mason, who does the attacking kind of work as well with them. They're going to have to work with him on getting more output in the final third, and that's a problem right now for Spurs across their kind of front three, especially with Sonny heading off. It is going to be, he's joining a crew of very talented attackers who need to produce more in the final third. So he's going to fit into those group sessions very well. But yeah, I think if you look at the fact that he's just going to, if Postecoglou feels he's going to fit this system like a glove, then, I'm kind of excited to see that, which I never thought I would be about, if someone had said to me, Timo Werner, a couple of years back, someone has kind of dug up an old article I said where I was kind of pointed him out as one that Spurs had to sign. I think it was in 2020. Was it 2020? It was just before he went to Chelsea, or a little while before. And hey, it's always the hope, and I know it's the hope that kills you, but it is about unlocking a version of the player that's in there, and we know he's in there. We've seen what it can be. I remember when Spurs played Leipzig under Mourinho in both legs, and that was that season, and you just knew that Werner was an absolutely incredible player, and you could just see in the way he played, he was so dangerous. And yeah, I think his confidence got knocked a lot during the Chelsea spell. Had some tough times because of that. But let's be honest, if there's any manager around right now who can make you feel loved, make you feel wanted, and make you feel like a top player. And most importantly, I think, just allow you to have fun playing football again. It's Ange Postecoglou. And it's one of those where I think you kind of question these things, and there's certain... I just find social media during the transfer window especially fascinating because of the way people flip-flop between opinions, and hey, including myself in that as well, especially today. It's been a day of kind of having to learn about a certain player more than the kind of surface stuff. But I just find it fascinating that, you know, you want certain players signed, and I love, especially the January window, a lot of the ideas of who players should sign are always a bit mad, and they're always like, well, that player would never leave in the middle of the window and everything. And it's quite interesting as well with Werner that, you know, you'd presume, unless there's another very cheap deal in the offing, that's instead of someone like Jota coming in, or they've, you know, and does that mean that they see, you know, and Postecoglou perhaps, that just Werner is got that Premier League experience, whereas with Jota maybe there's some kind of, again, the unknown. Would he step up to the Premier League? Is he ready for that? You know, and we don't know what the elements of any deal would have been with, is it Al Ittihad he's with in the Saudi Pro League? So yeah, I mean, again, if Postecoglou is greenlit, and from what I understand, again, I'm going to use that word, being instrumental in the move for Werner, you kind of got to stick with him right now, because quite frankly, not just right now, for a long time, but every move that he's kind of pushed for and wanted the player, they've all been very good. I think, like I said this before, the only unknown really in terms of first team is actually Phillips, because he was a younger player brought in for more the future, of course. But everyone else he's brought in has proved him to be right, has proved it to be a good purchase. And yeah, I mean, look, he's going to have options. He's going to have Mana Solomon's back soon. He should be back in training rather shortly. So you're going to have him. Obviously, he was making a bit of an impact before his knee injury, with those couple of assists against Burnley in particular. And then, yeah, like I say, Bryan Gil, I'm intrigued to see what that means for him. Obviously, he predominantly prefers to play on the left. We probably see him there more often. And obviously, if you're going to pick a wing for Timo Werner, that probably is the wing he plays more on. I'm not calling him a moron. But certainly looking at his kind of positioning in the last few years, he has mainly more played through the middle. So that's going to be an interesting one to see how that happens. But I could imagine with his pace, maybe more would be one of those kind of wing, like we see with Brennan Johnson, the run down the sides, then low knock into the box. That could probably suit him well. And with Bryan Gil, you know, positive little cameo last night. But again, I wonder if Postecoglou has to pick between him and Werner. And, you know, I'm not saying he has to, but I think if you're looking at those two players, you probably think Werner is going to be able to deliver for you in the Premier League. And I know someone's going to go, well, wait a minute, he didn't do that for Chelsea. I don't know why their voice would sound like that. But yeah, I don't know. I just have that feeling that with Bryan Gil, I just wonder whether we'll ever truly settle and be a part for Tottenham in the Premier League, or just whether his career lies back in Spain, where he loves it back there and he relishes it and the football suits him. He's no doubt he's a talented player, and I would love to see him succeed at Spurs. But I just wonder, they just keep bringing in players that can play in his position. I just wonder whether there's not that feeling that he's going to be able to do what they all hope he's going to be able to do. So yeah, we'll see with Bryan Gil. But and I think you've also got the fact that Ryan Sessegnon, a surprise return yesterday, is back, and he can cover that whole left side if they decide to keep him. It may be that he heads out on loan. But, you know, especially with Ben Davies' injury, which we'll have to talk about as well, you know, you've got Sessegnon who can kind of cover that whole left-hand side. You could use him as a left-back backup for a doggy when he's properly sharpening his rhythm again. And you can also use him as a potential left winger if required as well, because obviously he's played there in his career. So I do wonder whether you keep him for that, and that allows Bryan Gil then to head off, whether it be on loan or maybe even permanently. And interestingly, actually, Bryan Gil and Ryan Sessegnon's 2 numbers are the ones that Timo Werner has worn throughout his senior career. So 11, I think he's won for the last 8 seasons. 19, Sess's number, he wore when he came through at Stuttgart. So at the moment, he can't take any of those numbers unless there was a sudden bit of movement for Bryan Gil. He's not getting that number 11 before that Man U match when he would have to be have his shirt number registered for that. I mean, I don't know. I was looking at the other potential shirt numbers he could have. There's not many available at the moment, unless he wants to be number 1 or 2. That was weird, seeing that back of the matchday programme. It just started at 3 with Sergio Reguilon, and let's be honest, he's probably heading off as well, quite sharpish, if they can get a good deal for him. So then it's going to start with Skippy as the first name on the back of the programme, which is weird in itself. And then I think you've got 6, haven't you? Davinson Sanchez's number. That's not really a number for a striker, you would have thought. And then I think it was 16 was the next one. And there was a number in the 20s. It might have been 26. I think it was 26 is available. And then you start going into the 30s. So who knows? Those little things. Some people get really hung up on the squad number. I don't really care. I don't. Often players will take if they can't get the number they normally would get, they double it. So for him, for instance, Werner's been number 11, so maybe he would look at 22, but we know Brennan Johnson's got that, so that's not going to happen. I don't think they can change numbers either or swap them mid-season. I think that has to be done before the summer window closes. It might even be before the Premier League registration period. I think it might even be that. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, we will see. We'll see what happens with Timo Werner, but I understand that critics of the move may well point to the fact that yes, Tottenham have sold Harry Kane to the Bundesliga and Bayern Munich, and they have brought back from the Bundesliga a loan signing in Timo Werner, who acknowledged as a player that didn't really make it in the Premier League, and that does look rubbish. Completely acknowledge that. However, I do think you just have to see it as 2 different moves. I do. I think obviously Harry Kane going, and we'll see whether he is truly replaced up front and what that means. You would imagine that will be next summer, unless Richarlison may end up the rest of the season as a goal machine. He's on track in recent games to kind of go on a bit of a purple patch. He wasn't very good yesterday. We'll talk about that, but who knows? But I still think that you'd imagine they'll sign another target man type striker in the summer. But yeah, I think you have to see this as a separate deal to the Kane one. I don't think you can see it as we gave them Kane and we got back Timo Werner. I don't think it really works like that. I think Timo Werner is someone that is clearly was on their list of options and happens to be available in the January window, which is unusual in itself. I think his circumstances at Leipzig, he wasn't starting as many games. Like I say, the injury disrupted his season, but he wasn't quite the first choice player there. And people often look at that and they'll go, oh, well, why in the world would he then be a first choice player at Tottenham? But again, different managers, different systems, different way they fit in. He's said to be very excited about this move and working under Postecoglou, which I think everyone looks at the way Postecoglou teams play now, especially with Spurs. It just puts him on another kind of level for global players to see. And I just think that looks a lot of fun. Why not go and be involved in that? I'm intrigued to see how it works out. And like I said, it's a kind of a bit of a no-lose situation because they're covering his wages for the rest of the season, I think. But ultimately, it's another option. It's another experienced option. It's someone that's won things. He's got that winning mentality, regardless of what you think about his time at Chelsea. He's been a top scorer in seasons in the Bundesliga, I think 3 times maybe. He's a guy that knows where the goal is. He just seems to kind of forgot on the whole. But like I say, if anyone can get a rhythm out of him and a sharpness back, it is Postecoglou. And yeah, the fact that he will press fast and furiously at the front all lends itself to the game that Postecoglou wants to play. And just naturally, even if he's not making the impact in terms of direct goal involvement, just simply his threat on the pitch and his pace will open up opportunities for the other players. It kind of has a knock-on effect. It's kind of a reason why I think Conte at one point really kind of liked the idea of Adama Traore, because let's be honest, you want lack of goal threat and final third involvement, that's Adama Traore. But he got the kind of the knock-on effect for him. Even when he wasn't doing that, he could cause chaos and create spaces and opportunities for other players who can kind of profit from that. So I'm not comparing Timo Werner to Adama Traore. Timo Werner's goal stats and assist stats, honestly, are far, 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 far superior to Adama Traore's. You know my opinions on Adama Traore. Those who watched the videos back at the time. So yeah, we'll see. Look, if it works, if Postecoglou can get him back to his best, it could be a very clever mid-season move that no one really saw coming. He could be a player reborn. Who knows? But like I say, if it doesn't work, it heads back to Leipzig. Oh well, that's 6 months, and it was an experiment, and he was an option to turn to. I'm hopeful though. I am quite hopeful about it. The more I've read into him and what he's like as a character as well, he is a guy that needs kind of is someone just to stop his head dropping a little bit, I think, and the confidence. A lot of footballers are. And if he gets out of Spurs, settles in quickly, it's a good bunch at Spurs, good group of players that very kind of bring players into the fold, and make them feel very wanted. There's no cliques. Even the ones that you think are cliques, actually, like the South American crew and the Spanish-speaking crew, they all just mix with everyone as well. So I'm sure he'll settle in absolutely fine. He'll probably know some of the players maybe from his years in London before anyway. But yeah, so that's Timo Werner. We'll talk a bit more about transfers a little bit later on, of course. Radu Dragusin, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about him. We're going to talk about him as well. But just a little bit on last night's match. It was just one of those games, wasn't it? Things aren't going your way. You've just got to find a way through. Step forward, Pedro Porro with just a beautiful cup. I was going to say cup final goal, a cup goal. I was right behind it for my press box seat. It was beautiful. Sorry, top's going down there, showing a bit of chest hair. It was a very strange, different video. It's like some kind of 70s chat about other things. Tottenham. I don't know why I did that voice. It's nothing to do with the 70s. Where was that? That's absolutely thrown me. Pedro Porro. My own chest hair threw me. It was a beautiful goal. And I think while the performance wasn't amazing from Spurs at all by any stretch of the imagination, it was the kind of game where either A, they fluff their lines in front of goal and end up conceding a late goal to the opposition, a kind of smash and grab win on the road, or maybe even worse, there's a replay that we all have to trek up to Turf Moor in midweek, which nobody was looking forward to, and we were all kind of fearing as the game wore on. But Spurs didn't allow that to happen. They did the job. They got through to the next round, and as Ange kept telling us, that's all that kind of matters. And it is true, I guess. Look, you wouldn't have been delighted with the football on display at times. Spurs were kind of lacked a bit of creativity, a little bit of sharpness. When it did get in front of goal, they kind of fluffed their lines a bit. Richarlison guilty of a few. Brennan Johnson probably could have done a bit better with some opportunities, but I'll talk about him in a bit. He was one of my I thought he was, I'm not going to cross my arms because it pulled my shirt down. He was probably one of the brightest players for me on the pitch yesterday, and I saw he was still getting criticism, which I find a little bit sad so quickly, so early in his time at Tottenham. But again, we'll talk about him. I've got fair bits to say on him. But yeah, Pedro Porro, first goal of the season, fully deserved for the season he's had as well. It was probably the one bit of real quality in the match, and it was like a fizzing, dipping shot. And one of those, it's such a cliche, but as soon as he hit it, you knew it was going in. It was just one of those beautiful efforts. Yeah, very good indeed. And he's come close, hasn't he? He's had a few. I think he's hit the woodwork a couple of times, Porro, in previous matches, and this one's been coming. Yeah, and Burnley surprised me. I think I expected a very open Burnley, maybe more so like the one that Spurs encountered early in the season. But it wasn't. They were quite organised on Vincent Kompany's side. They were sat quite deep. A lot of the things I think, Kompany hadn't compromised on, he, I guess, slightly compromised on. And to be fair, it worked for long periods in the game. Spurs had 63% of possession, 530 passes to Burnley's 264. And they had 16 shots at goal compared to Burnley's 10, but probably most importantly, 7 on target, and the Clarets only had 1 effort, which was the one that Vicario saved from Wilson Odebert in the 7th minute. It might be Odebert. Apologies to Wilson. I'm absolutely killing the pronunciation of his name. The selection was quite interesting. Unlike, obviously, the Fulham game and the Carabao Cup, when Postecoglou got a lot of flack for changing so many players. Was it 9 or 10 players? I think it was 9. This time he only made 2 changes, and they were both kind of had to be made, really, because obviously Son and Sarr heading off to the Asian Cup and Africa Cup of Nations respectively. So he brought in Oliver Skipp and Dejan Kulusevski back from suspension. So, yeah, I actually thought he might bring Fraser Forster in. Sometimes they have these little arrangements with goalkeepers that they have to play it's almost like a verbal kind of gentleman's agreement, and we know how they go, that you'll get to play, let's say, a certain amount of cup games or all the cup games. But he decided, full strength, Vicario in there, which, I'm not against. Obviously, Vicario is the best goalkeeper Tottenham have, and he suits the system better than anyone else. But, I just thought with Fraser Forster, Postecoglou said he's one of the best kind of professionals he's kind of ever worked with as well. So he just thought maybe he rewards him for that. But yeah, I kind of put that suggestion out there. People were not happy with the idea, let's put it that way, on social media. I wouldn't say Spurs massively test Arajanet Muric, the Burnley keeper. There's a few times. Brennan Johnson probably gave him the toughest time on the night. But ultimately it was all about that Porro goal, which I think hopefully goes down as one of the FA Cup kind of classic goals for Tottenham Hotspur. It wasn't a classic match, but it was a classic goal. And Postecoglou's comments on it, yeah, it did take a special goal. It looked like that's what it was going to take. We controlled the game enough, but we were just a bit wasteful in front of goal. It's a cup competition even. The most important thing is you find a way to win, and we did that. It is what it is, the wastefulness. You've just got to deal with it. The most important thing is you can sit there and analyse it, but ultimately in a cup competition it's about being successful to get through to the next round, because in every game you're going to play in a knockout comp. It's going to take something on the day to get it done. Sometimes that can be conventional, sometimes it's unconventional, or something special like tonight, as long as it gets the job done. Brennan Johnson asked afterwards about getting through to the 4th round. It's pleasing. It was a tough game today. We probably made it harder than it should have been, but at the end of the day, we're through to the next round. I don't think we can ask much more. Dejan Kulusevski was particularly happy with the second half. It was definitely a better second half. I'll agree with that. He said, football is fun, but you have to work hard. The second half was really, really good. I'm pleased with how the team played in the second half. The first half was a little bit slow, but in the second half we played to our level. We have to work hard for the club. We have to, and we're happy that players are coming back. Like Mickey was back today. Mickey van der Ven on the bench. Sess was playing really well. It was a nice little bright cameo. Had a couple of moments where you could see he was a player that hadn't played for 11 months. His last game was exactly 11 months before that. But he could have scored. And the youngster Dane, obviously Dane Scarlett, came in, and I'm happy to have Dane back. So I'm happy. Now we've got a couple of days rest to live life and forget football for a couple of days, and then come back at United and get a strong result, and then we have another couple of days break. That's because of the little kind of mid-season break that is then upon us, which good for the team to re-energise and potentially bring in. I think it's actually after that, isn't it? I think the cup game would come after that. I'm trying to remember which way around it is. Let's have a look. I don't want to say the wrong thing. It would be the 4th round game would be on the weekend of. Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, so it would be the next one, wouldn't it? I think the cup game would be right at the end of January, I feel. And then obviously they go to Brentford on the Wednesday, as in right at the end, the last weekend of January, I think. If I've got that the right way around. Apologies if I haven't. So that was Dejan. His interviews are really interesting always. He's very wise. He talks like someone that's like in their 70s sometimes. It's very funny to listen to his interviews. And a couple of days break. So, it wasn't a classic. It wasn't a great game. I don't think any of us will remember that glorious night. Any of the 60,982 fans inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but you'll probably remember the goal, and that's important because it was an absolute cracker. It was a superb goal, and it came from a man that, let's be honest, has had the most ridiculous rise just really under Postecoglou. Because I mean, think back to just under 11 months ago, Pedro Porro makes his debut against Leicester at the King Power Stadium, 4-1 defeat. He didn't look good. He did not look good. There were a lot of people, as they do, immediately writing him off, saying that he was a terrible signing and a waste of space. It was a difficult performance. I mean, to be fair, it was really nervy looking. His first touch was ropey. He got absolutely dummied by Harvey Barnes, I remember, and Rodrigo Bentancur had to come across and get a yellow card for it. Obviously, Bentancur, we know later in that match, had an even tougher day of it. That was the day, wasn't it? The second half, he did his cruciate ligament. But yeah, he didn't really get to go forward much down the right. Porro, it just obviously looked shaky at the back because it was not really his forte, defending. It just wasn't a debut to remember fondly. Let's put it that way. It's probably the best way to look at it. And then I guess in the months ahead, there were little glimpses of the quality that he would bring, especially going forward. But then there was that absolutely horrendous horror show of a game at St James's Park, when the world could see in that system, traditional fullback, no, and we all kind of thought, why in the world have they brought a wing back in for a manager in Antonio Conte, who we all know is heading off? He will not be there next season. And you've brought in a wing back who's on loan with an obligation to buy. It's like, what are you doing, kind of thing. Enter stage left, Ange Postecoglou, who just really changed everything. And we kind of even asked him that in the summer. I remember on the tour saying to him, it was either myself or it might have been Tom Barkley. One of us said, you've kind of not quite been lumbered with him, but you've. I think maybe I asked recently. I feel like that question is quite fresh in my mind. I think I asked recently, but definitely he was asked in the summer about the fact that you've kind of had this player that the club have to buy, but he's very attacking. Are you going to be able to play him as a wing, as a right back? And he was just like, yeah. It's just like, yeah, I want him and a doggy, essentially Destiny a doggy. I want to be in a position where they're going to be my fullbacks. He was quite clear on it. And he just saw immediately, he'd researched him, he'd watched him closely, Porro, and I did think he knew this guy is a number 10 in my system. The inverted fullback that becomes a number 10 in the centre. He's got the ability on the ball, the ability to dribble, but also the playmaking ability to pick out a pass that's just like an attacking midfielder. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we're seeing right now. And what's also key that maybe isn't said quite enough is the work on the defensive side of his game. That's come with Matty Wells, has played a big part in that, Spurs defensive coach. Behind the scenes, he has really worked with Porro, and he was doing it actually because obviously he came into the coaching staff after Conte went. So those early seeds were there. He was working with him then when they switched to a back four. Obviously, Newcastle result aside. But he'd begun that work with him and obviously carried that on under Postecoglou. And they've kind of made a player who is more rounded. He can do something special at one end of the pitch in one moment, but he's also got this incredible energy and almost like the battery within him. He's like a Duracell bunny. He can get back at the other end of the pitch, and he often leads the defensive stats. Whenever I have to look at who scored with all their stats, who scored is the website, not to look at who scored. His stats are often the best of the defensive bunch. He normally leads in each of the categories, and exactly what he did last night. He had 4 tackles, 3 interceptions, 1 clearance, and he blocked 1 Burnley shot. But of course, the big thing of the night for him was that beautiful goal, and it was a wonderful goal. And I love the fact that he very classily dedicated it to young Harry Pitman, 16-year-old Spurs fan. Absolutely horrendous what happened. Killed on New Year's Eve. As Ange Postecoglou spoke so well on it, George Sessions asked him about him on Thursday at the press conference. He spoke so well, so I don't want to kind of do a muddy, clumsy version of that. But just to say, obviously, just horrendous for his family, and just horrendous to see anyone lose their life, let alone such a young boy. And it was a lovely moment, as lovely as you can get in these circumstances, but it showed football kind of coming together. 16th minute, obviously his age. All the screens in the stadium had a big picture of him with the hashtag #EndKnifeCrime. And yeah, the entire crowd stood and applauded. We all applauded as well. Pretty sure all the Burnley fans were applauding as well. Yeah, it was, as in the expression Ange used on Thursday, if it could just even be the smallest crumb of comfort for the family in what must be a horrendous time right now for them. It was one of those moments where, like I say, football came together and in the memory of someone taken far too soon. And Porro said on social media after the game, dedicating this win and my goal to you, Harry. And it was very, very good, very kind of fitting from such an awful thing. Kind of this good memory kind of is created. That's the only kind of way I guess you can. Oh, it's horrendous. I can't even think about it. On the goal, obviously the reaction you could see from the players when he scored was just mad. He's very popular as Porro in the training ground. He's the guy at Hotspur Way, one of those guys with Sonny and a few others like Pitman. They just don't look serious. They just have a big grin on their face every time. I've seen him out and about on the tour, just kind of walking around with the other players, and it's just got the biggest grin on his face. He just loves life, and he loves being a part of this squad as well. He feels very comfortable. Vicario's reaction to the goal is just so, ooh, that kind of thing. He started doing that with his hand. It's very, very funny, honestly. There's a few clips going on social media to kind of watch it back. Yeah, it was terrific. And just everyone mobbed him as well. And actually played down the goal himself after Porro. He said, I think it was luck. I'm very happy for the team and my first goal of the season. And Brennan Johnson, I presume it was, I've only seen the words, but I presume it was a joint interview on ITV. He said, Brennan Johnson said, there was no luck about that. It was an unbelievable strike. He shoots a lot in training and misses a lot, but this came off. And in the article, interviews afterwards on Spurs Play, there were some nice little bits. Dejan Kulusevski said of Porro, he's like a bulldog. He's doing a lot for the team. He's stepping up when we need him. He's been playing amazingly this whole season. He's a great guy, always bringing energy and always having fun. He's always shooting the ball, which is very important in football because that's how you score. Oh, it is. And he showed that today. Brennan Johnson in his interview said, everyone's buzzing for Pedro. When games like that are quite tough and maybe we aren't making the right decisions at the right time, sometimes it just takes a bit of quality. We know we have that in Pedro. He hasn't scored too many this season, but we all know the quality that he has, and he definitely deserved it today. And he was asked to give his own kind of view on the goal. He said, we'd lost the ball and he'd won it back and I was facing him. Obviously, I wasn't too optimistic when he took the shot. It went really high over my head and I didn't expect it to drop down like that. I'm sure the view of it is absolutely unbelievable. The way he hit it, it didn't spin too much and it flew into that top corner. I was absolutely delighted for him. And the other thing Porro has in his locker is those cross-field diagonal balls. And the one thing yesterday that had Brennan Johnson on the left, I prefer him on the right, personally. But the one thing you do get with him on the left is that Porro, who's very used to linking up with him down the right, instead pings the ball cross-field into his path. And for a pacey player, Timo Werner, anyone, Porro is going to pick out those runs quite a lot. So... yeah, he was asked about that way of linking up, and he said, I think playing on the right we have a good connection. This is Johnson. He likes to come inside, Pedro, and go outside sometimes, and me the same. I like to come inside and get close to the goal, but also I like to be out wide and get those crosses in. But when I play on the left, I know the balls that he has when he finds destiny making forward runs, and Sonny. So before the game today, when I knew I was going to play on the left, we did speak about it because I know that as soon as he likes to get the ball out of his feet, he can hit really quality passes. He did that well today and he managed to find me a few times. So if you look at Porro's stats now, this season he's got 7 assists and 1 goal in his 20 appearances, and that means in all he's got 10 assists and 4 goals in 37 matches. So that's 14 goals. It's approaching a goal involvement in every other game, which is startling for a fullback. He's a fullback. It's just mad. And that's that's his time at Tottenham so far. And Postecoglou loves him. He's got a real affection for it. You can tell it in the way he speaks about him. He's very, very, very keen on Pedro as a player. He just loves kind of what he brings to the team. And it's no kind of coincidence. He's played almost every minute. After that Brentford game, he didn't start the first game of the season. He wasn't even coming off the bench. But from that point on, he has played near every minute. I think there was one game, I think the game after that, he came off after 88 minutes, I think it was. So, he's just been a near ever present for Postecoglou. And Postecoglou was asked about him yesterday. He said, I think credit to him, and this is for his kind of improvement over the last year. I love Pedro because from the day I arrived, he's got so much passion and energy and enthusiasm for the game. He's worked really, really hard on the defensive side of his game. Obviously, it's a different kind of role. He's used to playing as a wing-back and he's got a lot more defensive responsibility, but we always knew he had the attacking qualities. He's shown that, not just tonight, but during the season, he's been a really big part of the creative part of our game. He's probably just missed a few goals this season. He's hit the post a couple of times and been unlucky, but I'm really pleased for him. And credit to him because he's worked really hard in his game and continues to do so. He's still a young man and he's been outstanding for us so far. And I was thinking about it, he's got to be up there in the player of the season kind of reckoning so far. I think he's probably just edged out by Sonny and Vicario, but Porro has to be right up there. And this was why some people were saying that he could be a potential kind of captain candidate because he's always in the team and he's so well respected within the team and liked. So, yeah, I kind of felt it was a little bit soon for him in that respect. Sorry, I was just double checking his age there. Yes, he's still pretty young. But yeah, played the season. That's a close one for me between Sonny and Vicario. Sonny has just been remarkable up front and what he's contributed to the team this season, how important he's been. And Vicario's the same at the other end. But Porro's up there. Porro's up there in the discussion, definitely. And talking to Sonny, if you weren't aware just kind of how much of a miss that he is for Tottenham, I think you just had to look at last night, Sonny. Obviously, like I say, you take someone out of your team who's not only your captain, but he's contributed 17 goal involvements in 20 games. I think some people maybe just kind of underestimated how much of a loss Sonny would be. I don't think they kind of maybe understand just kind of how much he puts into his work rate in the team. The fact that he's got the experience, I think, to know a little bit better than the rest of the younger players what to do in certain moments, the decisions to make in the final third. Not to mention his leadership skills as well that he's showing this season as well. And I think also there's the thing with Sonny is that because he's such a name, such a known quantity, sometimes teams will double up on him. They'll bring another centre-back across to also keep an eye on him. And that just naturally creates space for other players. So I think you suddenly take him out of the team and other players that have used to getting a little less attention suddenly are the focus of the defender's attention. You do miss him. And Postecoglou kind of speaking about him just ahead of the game, and he said, Sonny's been an outstanding leader in deeds, actions, and words, and we're going to need players to step up, irrespective of who's wearing the armband. We need to try and fill that hole that he's left because I think he's been outstanding for us. Sonny, if you name a team of the year at the moment, he's in it. He's been a hell of a player for us. It's a big loss for us, another one, and we're going to have to really raise everyone's levels to cover the absence of another significant contributor for us this season. And I do think Timo Werner, I do think there's an element of that to it as well. It's, regardless of what you think about his time at Chelsea, it's another kind of big name with certain really dangerous attributes that just gives defenders another thing to think of on that left side, probably while Sonny's away. And again, it creates competition, and you want competition for those front spots, and players being pushed on to know that in matches they can't be wasteful. They've got to take their chances, and they've got to kind of work on their decision making as well. So the captain was Rodrigo Bentancur, which was really nice. He was one of my potentials. It was either, for me, it was going to be between mainly Ben Davies, Vicario, and Bentancur. And I love the reasoning. Postecoglou said afterwards, actually no, before the game, it was about his journey and just essentially being a bit of a warrior, and that he kind of just felt he needed to reward him for all of that, and that was the captaincy. And he hasn't really been a captain through much of his career, if at all, Bentancur. But it kind of suits him at this stage of his career, and he's put a nice little message saying how honoured he was on social media after the game. Kulusevski was just delighted that he's back, essentially. He said, "I'm so happy. I feel strong when I'm with him. I feel strong when I'm with him on the pitch. It's a blessing playing with him. He's my close friend from many years ago, so I know how to play with him. I'm sure that he's going to help us even more in the future." I still don't think he's sharp yet, Bentancur. Had some nice moments again. I think it was a better performance than in the previous game, but against Bournemouth. But I just kind of feel like he's still not the Bentancur yet that we know is going to dominate matches. And I think you're mainly seeing that in his attacking play as well. When he's absolutely fully on it and dominant, he affects everything going forward and coming back as well. Even before he got the injury against Villa, that first half hour, everything was happening through him. And he was also putting beautiful balls over the top. He did a lovely chip ball to Porro. That kind of Porro, I think he knocked over the bar. I'm trying to remember now. But yeah, you know when Bentancur's fully sharp and ready because he is everywhere. Probably played a little bit more than he would have expected to yesterday. I think there were plans to kind of take him off, and Lo Celso had a bit of a tight muscle issue, so he came off, and that probably meant Bentancur stayed on that a little bit longer. Højbjerg was getting kicked all over the place yesterday. If anyone kind of wants to feel a bit aggrieved yesterday, it was Lo Celso. Did I say Højbjerg? I meant Lo Celso if I did say Højbjerg. Lo Celso was so many challenges just after the ball had gone on him that weren't really punished. But yeah, back to the attack. Missing Sonny. They didn't look great in his absence. I thought Richarlison probably had one of his poorest games since coming back from his injury. Obviously, his surgery. He's... honestly, we've been raving about Richarlison. Lovely finishes and everything. This was a bit more like the wasteful Richarlison. Had a couple of really good chances early on. Skippy put him through with a lovely quick pass into his path. And he just kind of got through and just scuffed it. He did similar against Bournemouth. And it's got a very similar reaction to Postecoglou. He was not impressed, let's put it mildly, on the sideline with that. And he just kind of was struggling to hold the ball up. He was dispossessed a couple of times. The ball wasn't really sticking with him, and that's the thing you need with Richarlison to bring. And I do wonder whether maybe it was a bit of the pressure on him. Even Sonny was saying a couple of times that Richarlison now has to step up as the goal scorer with him away. And maybe inadvertently, that there was more pressure on him because of that. I'm not saying Sonny put pressure on, but just everyone feeling that Richarlison had to step up. We'll see. I think it's probably too early to just judge him on the one game after Sonny's headed off. But he didn't have a lot of great service. I think you've got to give him that if you're going to give him a defence. But like I say, had that skippy ball. I'm trying to remember who played him through. He had another chance as well where he should have done better. And also, actually, in the moment before the Porro goal, in the build-up, he kind of had the chance to get the ball swivel and turn, and he kind of made a bit of a mess of that, which is why it ended up being cleared. And Porro won the ball back and hit that absolutely rasping shot. Kulusevski, I thought he was... I'm a big fan of Dejan Kulusevski, and I feel that he often has an impact that we can't see. But I kind of felt like last night he was probably the quietest I've seen him in a while. Started off on the right, the front three, moved to the left of the midfield three as the game went on when Lo Celso had to come off. I just didn't feel he really kind of created as much as he normally does. He seemed to be okay with his performance. He was asked afterwards about where he prefers playing on the pitch the most. He said, everywhere. I felt the second half was good for me and I created a lot of chances. I felt really free. And then obviously Pedro scored an amazing goal. And after that, I just remained calm and tried to help protect the lead, it was a strong performance. And it was just okay. It was just okay for me. I've seen him be far better than that, Dejan. For me, I think I said it at the top of this, the pick of the bunch for me was Brennan Johnson. I was kind of surprised that he just... fans kind of... They get an opinion that maybe becomes fashionable. And this is across all clubs, I'm not just saying Spurs fans. They get an opinion that maybe becomes a little bit fashionable to say. And then they will kind of shape the narrative to fit around it, I guess. So I could kind of see there's this thing now like, oh, you know, he's not actually that good. He's a waste of money, Brennan Johnson. He's not actually that good in front of goal and things like that. And I just think it ignores the fact that he's 22 years old. He's not really got a lot of Premier League experience. You know, came up last season with Forest. Had a good season for them after smashing it in the Championship. Came in with his £47.5 million fee, which is a big one. And I suppose fans maybe expect more of a finished product because of that fee. But from everything I've always understood since he's arrived, and still the case right now, is that the expectation for Postecoglou and those within the club is that he is a work in progress because he is 22. But they just feel that he's going to be absolutely devastating when he kind of things click for him in certain areas. Just because he's got so many attributes and the skill. There were so many moments yesterday and the crowd loved it. And the crowd could see it when Porro or anyone else would ping those beautiful balls across the pitch. Long, high, diagonal balls. And Johnson would just take it in his stride. It's beautiful. He's got a lovely technique to what he does. And I just felt that he was the one that, for me, was the most likely to make something happen yesterday. He had 6 shots on goal. 4 of them went on target. It wasn't like he was kind of sending them all over the shop. He tested Muric a couple of times. He played 1 key pass, went on 2 dribbles, ran back to make 1 tackle and 1 interception. And it's just... He's a very young player that is kind of finding his way right now. Postecoglou wants more of him in the attacking areas when the other winger or fullback is on the other side of the pitch. He wants him there to take advantage of that. He is a guy that's played through the middle, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see more of that in the future as well, that he plays through the centre at times for Spurs. But yeah, he's a work in progress, and I think the value more signifies what Spurs expect from him in the future and what he's going to become and just how good he can be, rather than, oh, we're buying for a player who's ready right now. We know Tottenham. I don't think Tottenham barely ever buy a finished product kind of thing. That's just not the way they operate, rightly or wrongly. And Johnson knows he's a work in progress himself, and especially the need to fit a system where he's going to be using that pace non-stop. He's going to be up the pitch, and the next minute he's going to be asked to run back. And he said it's definitely a challenge, and it's something I'm still getting used to since joining the club, but I couldn't really ask much more, being able to run to get goals, and I haven't scored as many as I would have wanted to running into those areas, but I'm getting close and creating things, and it's something I've always wanted to be able to run into those areas. Hopefully I can get some more goals soon. I hope that first home goal is coming. I had a few chances today, and I felt I was unlucky not to score, I think. Maybe I could have done better with a few other ones, but I'm just trying my best, and hopefully it will come soon. And like I said, I think losing him from the right probably impacted Richarlison as well. They've got this nice little link up at the moment where Johnson kind of runs down the right, Porro picks him out, and he'll hit a low cross straight into the kind of the 6-yard area where Richarlison knows to run into. And he even said about his link up with Richarlison after the game last night. He said, I think my game suits his game. This is Johnson. As soon as I get the ball at my feet, he's a goal-mouth poacher. He always gets in front of his man. I think last season when he didn't get too many goals, he was still in those positions, but maybe the ball didn't find him. This year, he's always in the right positions and so hungry to score goals. When I get the ball out of my feet, I'm just looking for him. And in the last few games, he's been in those positions. And actually, it was quite cool. He kind of talked about a little bit of advice that Postecoglou had given him about kind of his wing play and the way to work. He said, the one against, as in the goal against Bournemouth, we work on it so much in training. Early first-time crosses, and the manager says that if you look up, you're just wasting time. Because if you make a run in behind, then everyone is running backwards. So if you look up, it just gives that defence more time to get back into position. If I get that ball out of my feet and I put it into an area, then it's just down to Richie to get into those positions, and he always does. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Just a little kind of an insight there into. It's kind of obvious. I think we're so used to kind of players just taking that little glance and knowing where a play is, but I think in game just keep evolving, and because systems are so well worked on, the players know, a bit like total football, they know where each other are going to be at any various point in time, and that's what they're drilling into them. So that, yeah, he knows he can hit the corner of that 6-yard box on the right hand side from the right flank, and Richarlison will run across diagonally to that side of the 6-yard box and tap it in, and that's what he's been doing. So I mean, look, Johnson's got 4 assists and 1 goal in his first 17 Premier League matches so far. That'll increase. He's only going to get more used to Postecoglou's ways. He's only going to get more used to the Premier League. He's going to get fitter. He's going to get sharper. I just feel like he's got all the tools to become a real star. And I just think the fact that he's getting in those right positions are the kind of key as well. That's an important thing. I'd be more worried. It's such a cliche, but I'd be more worried if he just wasn't getting into any of these good positions. But he knows where to get into now. And he had a couple of volleys, one bouncing, one that the keeper saved. Remember that? And yeah, and he'll. I think he did one curling one that the keeper saved as well. Because that was a good thing. One good thing about him being on the left was that he was able to cut inside and shoot, which maybe he doesn't get as many opportunities to do on the right. He's maybe a little bit sticks to the chalk, as it were, the touchline more when he's on the right. So I've got no qualms about Johnson. I think it's part of a process for him, and I think he's going to be one hell of a player. I really do. And from everything I understand, Postecoglou feels very similar. So who else? Yeah, the little bench kind of cameos that we had. Like I say, Bryan Gil, nice moments. He won a defensive header in his own box. That shocked me. It was terrific. And I think actually at the other end of the pitch, he went up for a header and actually fouled the person. Little Bryan Gil chucking his weight about and winning aerial duels. Look, I don't think the doubts about his physicality are ever going to vanish, but it wasn't the worst little cameo. I thought he looked bright. He set up Sess for a chance when he came on. Just great to see Ryan Sessegnon back on the pitch. 11 months is just ridiculous. It's just so unfortunate for him. They had to, obviously, the last resort is always surgery, and they desperately tried to kind of go and kind of heal him in different ways after he injured himself. I think it was Man City was his last game for Spurs. Yeah, it was exactly 11 months before Friday night, and they kind of put it off, tried to hope that it didn't require surgery. Eventually, just that was the last option, needed surgery. Specialists involved who kind of hopes that this is the one that fixes it. That was the early indications. It was successful surgery, and that this would be the one that no more kind of worries about that hamstring, kind of the issues he's been having. But obviously it's been a slow road to recovery for him. They've been so cautious with him. Ange has very much kept him under wraps, said he wouldn't be back for a little while, and then he clearly has been training. And then he put him out there yesterday, and it was quite a bright little cameo. Like I say, other than a few little loose touches, there was one I remember on the touchline where the ball went out of play because he couldn't quite control it. But he was linking up well, running up and down that flank. Had a chance which I think the keeper actually got a touch to it, I think, and tipped it wide in the 86th minute. And it was, like I say, a pass from Bryan Gil. I asked Ange about him after the game, Sessegnon, and said, was this kind of good for him just to feel involved again? And he said, yeah, I guess so. It wasn't always the plan to play him tonight and give him minutes, but I thought if the game was going the way the game was going, it made sense to give him some time out there. He's missed a lot of football, and it will take him a while, but it's where we're at. We've got we had 3 centre-halves on the bench, young kids on the bench, so we're at bare bones, but this group of players keeps finding a way. I guess you could argue in that, him talking about how many defenders they had on the bench and kids, he was essentially saying, I need more attacking options on there, wasn't he? Lo and behold, within 24 hours, Spurs were making it happen for him. But with Sess, he's 23 years old. I can't believe every time I hear that, just because he's been around forever. Because obviously he started as such a talented 16-year-old. It just It's just mad, isn't it, how long he's been around. And hopefully for him, this is the start of a good period for him. Whether he sticks around or whether he goes out on loan, we'll see. Like I said earlier, I think maybe sticking around because of his versatility gives more options, especially with Ben Davies now with his hamstring injury. I just hope he just, puts the hamstring problems behind him, really. Who else? Dane Scarlett. Dane Scarlett is back, obviously, after his loan spell at Ipswich was cut short. He became available for selection from January the 1st. I said before, Postecoglou's always liked Dane Scarlett, always. For all those years. He's liked him since he came in the summer. He's been impressed with kind of what he's seen from him. His second appearance for Postecoglou, obviously played in the Carabao Cup game, 2 cup games. Did have an opportunity in the box late on. It wasn't long after the Sess chance, maybe a minute and a half later. He made a bit of a mess of it. It was going wide, and I think it hit a Burnley player and went out for a corner. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see how he develops now. And like I say, with Valise, with his knee injury out for a couple of months, it really gives Dane that chance to kind of be that young striker on the bench. And then there's Jamie Donley. I thought Jamie Donley had a really positive little cameo. Came off the bench with about 8 minutes left of normal time, but then there was another 7 minutes or so of added time. So he ended up getting about 15 minutes. And it was a tough one for him. It was a big ask from Postecoglou because this wasn't chucking the young kid on up front. It was chucking him into a midfield 3 that was quite attacking at that point. It had Kulusevski as well in there and Højbjerg, I think it would have been at that point. I think, because Skip came off as well. Yeah, so... Højbjerg replaced Skip, didn't he? Yeah. I think, Donley came on for Bentancur. So he had that kind of 15 minutes or so against a Burnley side throwing everything, even the goalkeeper coming up for corners, to try and get something out of this cup game. And I thought he did very well. He did a lot of off-the-ball work. He only touched the ball 9 times, but he actually made 1 key pass, made 1 really important tackle, and just kind of a lot of his positioning was very good. Didn't give the ball away. Didn't look out of place. It's kind of fascinating to see what happens with him next, because I understand there's quite a few Championship clubs interested in taking him on loan for the second half of the season, getting a lot of interest. But Spurs at the moment seem quite set to have him stick around and learn from Postecoglou and learn from the attackers at the club and really just push on his development and ready him for maybe more first team involvement. You'd think maybe next season, unless he has this amazing explosion into the team in the second half of the season, you'd imagine a loan move for him like Alfie Devine has had would be a good one next season, but certainly a lot of interest in him. And I think also getting him to play the under-21 games as well, I think that's important for the under-21s and for him to kind of get that experience at both levels. And that allows, I'd imagine we'll see, obviously Josh Keeley's gone off on loan, goalkeeper, to Barnet. Good loan for him. National League side, third placed in, they were last time I looked in the National League. For a goalkeeper, any move where you're going to get first team regular minutes is a good one, especially for him. Republic of Ireland under 21 international. I think he's only 19. Really good move for him. And I think others that potentially could join him, probably looking at Judson Bell. I think there were some rumours linking him with Millwall as a potential one. Will Lancashire probably get some game time somewhere would be good for him. Iago Santiago, he's a little bit older. I think he's roughly the same age as Sunset Bell, that 2021 kind of age group. So yeah, they probably need a loan spell to kind of push on their careers if it looks perhaps that they're not going to break into Postecoglou's plans. And that obviously when you let any of those or all of those go, then I think the likes of Jamie Donley suddenly become very important for them as well. But hey, made his FA Cup debut now, made his Premier League debut. Brilliant for him. What a season for him. He's such a nice, kind of just humble young man as well. He's got a great head on his shoulders. He was walking past the press conference room on Thursday. It just as he was walking past, looked in and just went hello like that. It's just kind of little things like that. It's such a silly little thing that kind of probably means nothing to most people, but just just to kind of know that he kind of has this this way about him, just to kind of just be nice. And you've heard me say this about Oliver Skipp in the past as well, and I think it's so important. The players that have got quality, but they've also got that good head on their shoulders, will always get far further in their careers than other players who maybe have an incredibly high opinion of themselves, and to the detriment of their opinions on other players and their teammates and anyone else involved. It's just so important. If you've got a good head on your shoulders, if you've got the talent as well, you're going to go far. And that's my hope for Jamie Donley. He's a good young player. So yeah, what else we got? We had the Eric Dier moment, of course. How can I forget the Eric Dier moment? Woo. Ange got a bit angry. Did get a bit angry. So if you're not aware, Eric Dier missed training on Thursday ahead of the game. He's got this kind of soreness, muscle soreness, which has been a bit of a frequent occurrence this season. There's been a few times he hasn't been able to train, and Postecoglou's come out with this same kind of sentence about he's felt soreness. I feel like it was groin. He had a groin problem certainly midway through the season, and he obviously had groin surgery towards the end of last season, wasn't it? He was got a lot of pain there, and he had to get it fixed. But I don't know whether it's the same groin or same issue. I don't know. But look, we know Eric Dier is not the right fit for Postecoglou's system anyway. We kind of said that from the start. And then, of course, yesterday there were the links with Bayern really kind of came out far stronger way. And so Postecoglou was asked. He'd been asked in his ITV interview, and in that he'd said that he was injured. We didn't know. We didn't know he was injured or not at that point. So he was asked by one of the reporters in the press conference, essentially to confirm that. Well, I think it was the case. Is it that he's injured? I think you said in your other interview, and he said, yeah, he's injured. Just pulled up sore and didn't train yesterday. And then the follow-up question to that, I don't think it was meant in the way that Ange took it, but it was just awkwardly phrased. So it was phrased along the lines of something like, so there's nothing in the links to Bayern Munich. We understand there's an agreement. And I think in an ideal world, you separate those two questions. You don't make it anything to do with the fact of what's just been said about the injury or the unavailability or whatever. As soon as he kind of got halfway into that question, bang, Ange was in there. He said, separate issue, mate, but don't question my integrity. And he was like, almost growled as he said it. He said, when I say he's injured, he's injured. He didn't train yesterday. I can get vision, and this took us an age to work out what he'd said, but it's vision, which is Spurs training system video footage. They obviously monitor all the training sessions. It's called Vision, the software. He said, I can get vision for you, or you can ask him. It's nothing to do with anything else. I've got no idea about the Bayern move. When you ask me whether he's injured, he's injured. I didn't make that up. If he wasn't injured, I'd say he wasn't selected. It's easy for me to say he's injured. And in terms of anything else that's happening, not on my radar, not that I've heard of. If there's something, I'm sure I'll hear of it. But fair to say, in the past 24 hours, we've been focusing on the game and the guys that are available. He was angry. It was like, whoa. We had to kind of steer the presser away from that after to try and get him back into a kind of a more of a talkative mood. I think Tom Barkley asked him about Porro, and then I asked him about Sess, and it was just like, let's talk him back down again. And look, it's, to be fair, Postecoglou has actually, in saying that about injuries, he hasn't been very transparent recently about injuries. He was early days. We were quite like, oh, this is a breath of fresh air, because Christian Stellini was horrendous. You'll have heard me say before, Christian Stellini, if there was a player injured, he would hide that in his back pocket, and we would not know about it until the game. We'd ask him, so who's injured and not available? And he'd say, oh, it's just player X, or no one, everyone's fit. And we get to the game and there would be like 3 players missing. And when Ange came in, it was like, praise the Lord. We're getting proper updates. We know who's out. We know who's coming back and everything. And I would say, and it's been a real thing among the press, we've been speaking about this, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, he's just been far less transparent, is probably the best way to say it, about the injuries and also players coming back. We're finding that we're getting into games and there's players that he hasn't said were injured have missed the game. And we've also had a few players, obviously Bentancur, Mickey van der Ven yesterday, Sessegnon, that when we've asked him kind of who's on the way back, who's been training, he hasn't made that, he hasn't told us. He hasn't. And look, that's his prerogative. And I get the aspect of as well, there's a tactical side to it of not, and that was the thing with Stellini apparently. It was very much the tactical, not giving the opposition any advantage whatsoever. I think Poch and Jesus Perez used to be a bit like that at times as well. And I get it, but it's just like when a player has clearly been training all week and then suddenly they're in the matchday squad. I mean, to be fair, Van der Ven actually, he did say it, probably because it started to get out there that he was likely to be okay. So it has been a little bit difficult to kind of trust the injury updates recently because could someone else suddenly be in there, But again, I get why he does it. I get it. If I'm a manager, I'm probably not giving every cough and spit to everyone. But yeah, we're talking about kind of giving a response. When he was asked about Eric Dier right at the end of the press conference, the last question was, so obviously with the Ben Davies injury, can you afford to let Eric Dier go? He just thought, just for a moment, he went, yes. And that was it. That was the end of the press conference. It was like, whoa, okay. It was just like, it's one of those where maybe if it had been another manager, it might have got a bit of flack for that. It's a tough way of saying it about a player, and just clearly how Eric Dier is just not in his plans. Whether he's annoyed him in any way with not being available for training, I don't know. That's massively to speculate. I'm not saying that's the case. But that was strong. Or whether he was just a bit annoyed and angry already from the rest of the press conference. It could be. So he was still in that kind of that mood. It was certainly an interesting press conference. They always are with Postecoglou. We've kind of got this into our heads now that there's going to be at least one journalist who's going to be not picked on, but is going to be an object of fun. Let's put it that way for Postecoglou. He's going to take the mickey out of them a little bit, and we kind of all got to see if it's our turn or not. But it's as long as it's not unpleasant, it's just part of the fun. Certainly, I've had mine. I had the whole chicken coop, the pecking order thing. That was him kind of having a bit of a laugh with me, but that's fine. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's like it's been nasty or anything. But we just know that that's kind of the agenda for the press conference. Someone's going to be taking the mickey out of, and it's part of our job. And we do, if we're going to put ourselves up there to ask the questions, sometimes we're going to ask them silly ones, and or sometimes he's going to make them look silly, even if the question to begin with wasn't. The reason I was just looking to my side there is there's some kind of reports in Italy suggesting that Juventus will get a cut of any potential fee from Radu Dragusin if he heads on, which is it is how much? 20% apparently, according to the reports in Italy, which is why presumably they want to get as much as they possibly can for him. Sorry, I just noticed that came up. I always like to try and include all the latest stuff, especially if there's reports from that country. They're going to know plenty about that player. There you go. Right, sorry, back to it. Yeah, so Eric Dier, look, hey, I think it's a great move for all parties. I think he's got no future at Tottenham, clearly. It's a move for Bayern that shows their willingness to keep Harry Kane happy. It's one of his best mates in football, getting him over there. And I think, despite what people might think about Eric Dier, I think in the Bundesliga especially, I think he'll be a very good central defender, potentially also a defensive midfielder as well for Bayern. I think he'll do absolutely fine there. And look, there is strong interest from what I'm told. And also I'm told from Dier's side, there's strong interest in going there. Dier, who's set to become a dad for the first time quite shortly. I think that baby's on the way if it hasn't already. I think we probably would have known on social media if it had. But just, now it's a point of it's striking the deal between Bayern and Spurs. For me, and this is only me, hey, it provides a solution for Spurs. It's a player that they were going to lose for nothing in 6 months' time. If they can get a small fee for him, an England international, and this is another thing for him, goes to Bayern, plays well, maybe plays himself into contention for the Euros, a spot in the squad. But also it's removing another of the higher earning players out of the wage bill. And suddenly, you've had Lloris and Dier, who you've probably budgeted to be at least there till the end of the summer, end of the season. You've got two of the higher earners out of the club, which, that frees up. It's got to free up a little bit of finance as well for other deals. So, I'd be surprised if Spurs negotiate too hard on this. You never know. It is Spurs. And, Daniel Levy certainly wants to get the most money for any player he can. But surely, kind of just getting Eric Dier out of the club, a player that Postecoglou's never going to use. Even if there's the biggest injury crisis in the defensive area, he would probably play Bryan Hill in central defence. Let's be honest, he would. Hey, Bryan Hill, defensive header the other day, last night. Maybe that's what he's preparing him for. I jest, of course. But I just think it's a move that kind of suits all parties. I just really think it does. Who else we got? So I'm trying not to sneeze. I can feel a sneeze in the back of my throat, and I'm trying desperately to fight it away, which is why I look a bit weird like this. Sergio Reguilon's back from Man U. I asked Ange about him on Thursday, and he kind of distanced himself a little bit from him because the point is I made to him then, you play him. He's not going out on loan because that will be two clubs, and you can only play for two clubs in a season. So I guess the fact that he wasn't involved in the squad yesterday kind of says that as well. You get him back out there, and you because he'll be a decent earner as well at the club. So you kind of, I would have thought the Man U loan will have helped him in terms of potential suitors, because he got a fair bit of game time. I think just having on your CV that you're a left back for Man U probably helps you for some clubs that might not have seen whether he was that good or not. Certainly those who cover United told me he was, I think, very mixed in his performances is probably the fairest way to put it. So he's back. Still waiting to see whether Japhet Tanganga joins him. I haven't heard any word on that yet, but it did sound like a potential because Augsburg are having to kind of really cut the number of players they've got, especially centre-backs, because they've switched to a manager now who plays the back four rather than the back six. That's not back six, a back three. So having 6 central backs for 2 spots suddenly is far more than they needed, and obviously Japhet hasn't played all season. But waiting to hear on that one. Sorry, I just thought that was a little bit extra. It was just someone having their say on the Timo Werner move in my WhatsApp messages. Jed Spence is back. That one a bit more of a surprise to Spurs. I think they kind of expected Sergio Reguilon was likely to be a half-season loan because United were waiting for players to come back to fitness. But Jed Spence, that's not a great one. That's not one that's a disappointing development for just a player that kind of feels like he's lost his direction in recent seasons. Daniel Farke spoke about him. He was asked about him. It was kind of one of those where he said everything without saying everything, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of stuff you could easily read between the lines, and just clearly a loan move where the player just fell short of what Farke and Leeds expected of him in various ways. It was very, very reminiscent of Daniel Farke when he had Marcus Edwards at Norwich back in 2018. Felt very similar comments. And the great thing for Marcus Edwards is that Marcus Edwards, not long after, everything started to go back in the right direction for him. He got a loan move to, I think it was Excelsior Rotterdam, where Troy Parrott is, in the Netherlands, which was a really important one for him. Halfway through the season, he was a bit homesick, I think, in the first half of that season. And in the second half of the season, I think just getting in a new environment, not relying on the same people maybe he had around him a lot before that, it just clicked for him. And then that really, his adaptation meant that he could go to Portugal, settle in really well, Vitória, and obviously now Sporting Lisbon. And he's got a terrific career. He's one of the most talented, most creative players in Europe. And who knows, one day maybe Spurs will sign him back, but they've still got what do you call it? A sell-on clause for him as well. So who knows? And then I just hope that for Jed Spence, that's the case for him as well. Yeah, obviously a talented player, but so much more to being a top footballer than that. And yeah, like I say, I wonder whether a foreign move for him would be a good thing. Just to be around different people, just have different people around him, ground him a little bit more, and just reignite his career. Because I always feel with these young players, and like I say, it's born from a reporting career for me that started in non-league and the lower levels of the Football League, and seeing so many Premier League players come down there and think they were the absolute bee's knees, despite the fact they'd been released by an academy or whatever, it hadn't worked out for them, or they had a bad injury, and just seeing these players with what ended up not being the right attitude to get them in the direction they wanted to, never get back to where they wanted to. And I think for Jed, it's just a case of taking on board what everyone is saying about him. You know, it can't be all of these managers are wrong, you know, and Conte not really wanting or playing him after seeing him in training. Postecoglou in feeling that he wasn't for him. Daniel Farke now. Obviously, Neil Warnock in the past. I think Chris Wilder at Middlesbrough didn't particularly want him as part of his squad. And again, I should stress, I'm not kind of trying to pile on, you know, a difficult point in his career for him. But it's just to say that there's an incredibly talented player there. And one we saw it at Forest under Steve Cooper. Maybe wherever Steve Cooper goes next, maybe that's the secret. Maybe he'll look to bring Jed Spence with him. Who knows? There's talk about him going to Palace. That would be an amazing move for him. Wherever he ends up, wherever they can kind of get him to this summer. I just hope, this winter. I hope that any fallout from this loan to Leeds hasn't put off any potential suitors. And like I said, I still think a foreign move would be terrific for him. But ultimately, he's got to agree to it. And I'm sure, you know, I think even kind of the move to Leeds took a little bit of selling, from what I understand, to Jed. And that's a terrific club. That's a brilliant kind of move for him. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, I cannot get away from that. Terrifically talented player. Just really hope that he brings everything else required to the game to be a star. Because, like I say, when you've had this many managers almost in a row, you know, Steve Cooper aside, kind of just want that bit more from you, I guess you just kind of listen to it. I hope. You know, it's all constructive. We've all had constructive criticism in our careers as well, and hopefully you take it on and you try and build from it. So yeah, I just look. Spurs need reinforcements. Players are going to head out the door, but they need reinforcements as well, because every time Postecoglou seems to get someone back, he loses someone. You know, last week it was he got Bentancur back, then he loses Valise to a knee injury. This week he gets Mickey van der Ven back in his squad, and Ryan Sessegnon loses Ben Davies to a hamstring injury right at the end of the game. None of us knew about it, honestly. When he said it in the press conference, we were absolutely shocked. Just gutting as well, because Ben Davies has been brilliant. He's been superb. All of these people that kind of have always been there kind of knocking him and running him down, he has been there for Tottenham once again. He's been superb, filling in a not his natural position. Same with Emerson Royal. Emerson Royal, again, I thought was very good yesterday. Another performance, and who knows, he might have to now play in that role for a little bit longer. We thought that was likely to be his final game there, but maybe not. Postecoglou said after the game, Emmy, as he calls him, has been great. We've put him in there and we've had no choice about it. He's been outstanding. He's another one who's just got the best attitude in terms of just ask me what to do and I'll do it. That's what he does on a weekly basis, and he's been great for us. Unfortunately, it looks like Ben Davies has done his hamstring injury. He's done his hamstring tonight, which is another blow for us, because those two have been real warriors for us in the last few weeks. And yeah, the Davies injury, it just kind of accelerates, if it wasn't already enough kind of accelerated, the need to bring in a centre-back to just just a natural centre-back, someone that can come in there and immediately do a job. It's just crazy now. Of course, Postecoglou just needs to be able to put two centre-backs in the team together. Even that would be a bit of a luxury. He hasn't had that since the... No, he didn't even have it, because Wolves was Davies and Dier. So technically he hasn't had two centre-backs together since the Chelsea game began all of those weeks and a couple of months ago. Look, we know Spurs continue to be in the chase for Radu Dragusin. Despite Napoli doing their very best to jump into the top of the queue, they're throwing very attractive offers in there for Genoa in terms of not only a bit of cash, but players that Genoa like. A couple of players, by the sounds of it, as well. Trying to entice them, and also trying to entice the 21-year-old himself, Dragusin, because he would likely probably get more playing time at Napoli than he would at Spurs. But from what I understand, he would prefer a move to the Premier League. That obviously is one of his dreams, as a lot of players kind of do dream of doing it if the deal can be done. And that's, I think, the ace in their hand for Spurs, is they've got that, and that I think Dragusin is waiting for them to kind of come in with a better offer as well. And I think they know that, which is often the way Spurs operate with deals like this. And let's be honest, in terms of playing time, the amount of times Spurs got players injured, the amount of times that Romero picks up a suspension, who knows, Mickey van der Ven could pick up a suspension. He could end up playing just as many minutes. And if he comes in and does fantastically, there's nothing to say that he won't keep his spot. So it's a challenge for him. It is the biggest league in the world, let's be honest. And even though we're completely biased because we're involved in it or watch it, it is a big move for him. And it's the Davies injury really increases the need to get the deal done for me ahead of the Man U game. Even if that means someone like Dragusin, hopefully Dragusin, because he's a player they clearly want, in before that game and putting him straight in alongside Van der Ven. Postecoglou wouldn't be scared of that. He put Van der Ven and Udogie together against Brentford. I don't think Van der Ven maybe had one training session. I don't even know if he had a training session. So he's not going to be scared of that. It's just, you could look at it from the other perspective. For Dragusin, hello, debut, Tottenham Hotspur against Man U, Old Trafford. That's why I want to move. That's exactly it. And that's the kind of thing you'd imagine a player like he will relish. Let's see what happens in the next probably 48 hours on that one. I think that's going to be the key period. And Spurs, I think it will just be a case of, we need the numbers. We need to get him through the door. We need to we can't really afford to mess around with this too much now. If he wants to come, that's great, but let's make it happen. And, because that squad needs kind of improving. It needs strengthening. It needs more volume to it. And that's why the Timo Werner deal has moved so quickly, so that he can have another attacking kind of body in there as well. And I think once you get a centre-back in and a versatile attacker in there, in Werner, that gives you the remainder of the month, really, to look probably mainly for that number 8 that I've said they're kind of hopeful for as well. But also look at who could go out the door, and there are opportunities to let someone go and then improve the squad, to let someone go out and bring in a better player or a better suited player to Postecoglou's system. That's probably the way to look at it. Because, especially that midfield at the moment, Oliver Skip, still a number 6, they're trying to put him in a number 8 role, and I do feel sorry for him because he looks like a 6 and an 8. He put in that terrific ball to Richarlison early on, but he's kind of being asked to do things that maybe aren't in his natural wheelhouse. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, of course, he'll be allowed to leave if a good offer comes in and they've got a replacement they can bring in to replace him. He's still making an impact. He is from the bench. Really important block late on from to deny Han Delacroix or Delacroix deep into stoppage time. That essentially would have made us all had to go to Surf Moor had he not got in the way there. But look, it just feels like his future lies elsewhere. Postecoglou keeps saying he needs every one of these transfer windows to shape his squad. I asked him on Thursday ahead of the game if he had a number of players in his mind that he'd like to bring in this window, and he said, no, it doesn't work that way. There are a lot of moving parts in a window like this. Generally, you don't expect too much in terms of activity, But again, I've said before that every opportunity we have to strengthen the team, strengthen the squad, we should try and take. Depending on the sort of opportunities we have to do that, depending on the sort of opportunities, we have to do that this month, and we'll try to. So yeah, look, they've got enough kind of cooks in the kitchen. They've got Johan Lang, technical director, chief scout Rob McKenzie. You've got the brilliantly titled head of football insights and strategy Frederick Leth, all coming from Villa. Of course, you've got Fabio Paratici looming in the background. Still there on a consultancy basis, and we know that Dragusin signing is heavily Paratici influenced as well, and someone that Postecoglou likes. And of course, Scott Munn overseeing it all as the chief football officer. And then there's Daniel Levy, the man to sign it all off on those deals that come in and sit on his desk, either into the club or out of the club. Look, even just getting in Werner early would show that Postecoglou's got increased power in getting things done. I've said this before, an early January transfer deal does not happen at Tottenham. I think the earliest I could find looking back was Jedson Fernandez, and that was middle of the month. And obviously that did not go very well. But yeah, it just shows his kind of increased power, really. And every transfer that he's made has been, like I say, met with his approval. Has to be there in place for them to come in. And every arrival he's brought in has benefited Tottenham, and I think people realise that quite quickly. And there's no reason to think that January will be any different at all. Just give him the players he wants. It's as simple as that. And he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that, maybe unlike some other managers, is going to ask for silly transfers, people that are just unobtainable or ridiculous amounts of money. He very much seems a practical guy that is used to building teams within means, because that sounds rubbish, but I guess it kind of is. But just building teams that can fit, and players that will fit from any kind of area of the game. And Spurs could certainly put a bit of money behind it. Of course they can. Of course they can. The Spurs are a big, powerful club, and if there's anyone you're going to kind of put a little bit more money towards something for, it's Ange Postecoglou. It really is. So big game up next. Man United. I'll obviously do a video in the week if other stuff happens. And look, this is the way with the transfer window now that this could be out of date by the time you watch it. Things change so much. I'm even refreshing everything I've got while I'm doing this, just in case there's any little bits and pieces come out in other countries without. I don't want to kind of. It does, because it all dates so quickly, stuff. So please watch this as quickly as you can. But yeah, as I keep saying, Spurs have done so well so far with all the challenges thrown at them, and now's the time to help Postecoglou replenish and restock his squad and continue to improve it. And then Spurs, we can look forward to a very exciting second half of the season. But yeah, immediate kind of aftermath of this, Timo Werner, hopefully, in England over this weekend, ties up that deal. And let's see what happens with Radu Dragusin. But, Spurs want him. He seems to want Spurs. You've just got to make that happen. You really have to, especially as Postecoglou needs him in that back line at the moment right now. And I think Genoa know that as well. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to speak about in the next video. But as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and catch you later. Goodbye.